Imagine this. Every time you say you're afraid of being alone, what if it's not the empty room you fear, but the person waiting for you inside it? We often believe that the ache we feel is loneliness, a longing for another voice, another presence, another heartbeat near ours. But if we look closer, the fear is not born from the absence of others, it comes from the presence of ourselves. Loneliness is a surface illusion, a convenient label for something far more intimate and unsettling. The real fear is not that no one else is here. It is that we are here, with no one to hide us from the reflection of who we are when all distractions fall away. In the quiet, there is no buffer between you and your own thoughts. Every memory, every regret, every unresolved question begins to rise like shadows in a still room, demanding to be seen. When surrounded by people, we are able to dress ourselves in the identities they expect. We become the friend, the worker, the parent, the entertainer. These roles shield us from the naked reality of our inner state. But when the voices fade and the stage lights dim, the costumes come off. What remains is not the performance, but the performer stripped of all scripts. This is the moment many run from, mistaking it for isolation, when in truth it is confrontation. We are not afraid of the empty space. We are afraid of what we might discover in it. The mind has a way of turning inward in silence. It begins to sift through old choices, revisiting paths not taken, questioning the life we live and the person we have become. This is not always a gentle process. There are corners of the self we have avoided for years, places where unhealed wounds and denied truths still linger. To be alone is to risk encountering these corners, to stand before the very parts of ourselves we have locked away. The fear is not of loneliness, but of recognition. We sense that if we look too closely, we may have to admit that the person we are is not the person we wish to be. It is easier to blame the discomfort on solitude than to acknowledge the deeper cause. We tell ourselves we need more friends, more social gatherings, more noise, when in reality we may need more courage to face the quiet. Loneliness can be escaped through company, but self-confrontation cannot be escaped through any external source. We can carry our fear into crowded rooms, into conversations, into relationships, and still feel the same unease when the day ends. This is why some people feel lonely, even in the presence of others, because their real fear sits across from them, at every meal, follows them to every bed, and greets them every morning in the mirror. The absence of others is only the doorway. What we dread is stepping through and finding that on the other side is a version of ourselves we are not prepared to meet. Silence has a way of peeling back the layers we have so carefully built. When the world around us grows quiet, the usual hum of activity that keeps our minds busy fades, and what remains is the sound of our own thoughts. In that stillness, the questions we have avoided for years begin to surface. They arrive uninvited, like forgotten letters slipped under the door, each one carrying truths we have tried to bury. It is not the absence of sound that unsettles us, but the presence of what sound was keeping away. The conversations, the music, the constant scroll of information, all of it acts as a curtain shielding us from the inner stage where our most private truths wait to be acknowledged. When the distractions are gone, the mind turns its gaze inward, exploring spaces we rarely visit. Memories emerge from the shadows, not just the pleasant ones, but those we hoped had been erased by time. Regrets rise to the surface, moments when we betrayed ourselves or ignored the voice that told us what was right. These buried truths are patient. They do not fade simply because we have ignored them. In silence, they sense their opportunity and speak again. There is a particular weight to these moments of confrontation. We are forced to notice patterns we have fallen into. Choices that repeat themselves like loops in a film reel. Mistakes we make over and over because we have never paused long enough to understand why. Silence strips us of excuses. Without the constant noise of the external world, there is no one else to blame for the discomfort that rises. We are left with ourselves, face to face with truths that may be uncomfortable but are undeniably ours. This is why so many people avoid stillness. They fill their days with business, with endless tasks and conversations, not because these things are always necessary, but because they keep the truth at bay. The mind becomes like a house where certain rooms are kept locked. The silence is the key, and we fear turning it, because we know what waits behind the door. Yet those rooms remain part of the house, whether we enter them or not. Silence does not create these buried truths. It only reveals them. They have always been there, shaping our thoughts, influencing our actions, guiding our lives from the shadows. We may convince ourselves that avoiding them is safer, but in truth, their unacknowledged presence has more power over us than we realize. Facing them in moments of stillness is the first step toward understanding and integrating them, but that requires the courage to sit in the quiet and let what comes, come. It is in these moments, when the outer world is hushed, that the inner world speaks the loudest, and its voice is one we can ignore only for so long. When you are surrounded by people, it is easy to wear the roles that life has handed you. You slip into them without thinking. The loyal friend, the dedicated worker, the dutiful family member, the one who always smiles, the one who always listens. These masks fit so comfortably because they have been shaped over years of repetition. They are reinforced by the expectations of others and by the relief they give you from having to show what lies underneath. Yet when you are alone, these masks begin to loosen. The invisible hands that hold them in place disappear, and you are left without the daily validation that tells you who you are supposed to be. This is when the carefully constructed image begins to dissolve. The version of yourself that exists to satisfy the needs of others cannot survive in solitude. In the absence of an audience, the performance ends. There are no lines to deliver, no expressions to fake, no roles to maintain. What emerges instead is the raw, unpolished essence of who you are without witnesses. And for many, this unveiling is not a source of peace, but of deep discomfort. It is in these moments that the difference between the persona and the self becomes most apparent. The persona is a shield. It protects you from rejection, from judgment, from the vulnerability of authenticity. But in the quiet, with no one to play for, you are forced to encounter the self behind the shield. Sometimes that self is unfamiliar, shaped less by your own desires and more by the compromises you have made to fit in. This is why solitude can feel like standing in front of a stranger, one who looks like you but speaks with a voice you barely recognize. The discomfort grows because you realize how much of your life has been spent maintaining the image rather than nurturing the truth. You see how easily you have bent to please, how quickly you have hidden parts of yourself to gain acceptance. Alone, there is no applause for this performance. The traits that earned you approval in the outside world mean nothing in the quiet of your own company. The self that remains does not care for applause. It longs for acknowledgement, for honesty, for integration. This is why being alone can feel heavy. It strips you of the scaffolding you have leaned on for so long and shows you what stands without support. Sometimes it is strong, sometimes it is fragile, but whatever it is real. It is yours. The mask cannot protect you here because there is no one to deceive but yourself. And even self-deception begins to falter when the silence deepens and the truth becomes impossible to ignore. In this way, solitude is not an enemy, but a mirror. It reflects not the image you wish to present, but the reality you carry within, waiting for you to have the courage to meet it without turning away. There comes a moment in solitude when you realize that the unease you feel is not about being alone, but about being confronted by a self you barely know. This self is not the polished version you present to the world. It is the one that has been quietly existing beneath the surface, neglected in favor of more socially acceptable identities. Over time, the distance between who you truly are and who you pretend to be grows so wide that the authentic self begins to feel like a stranger. When you are alone long enough, the introductions begin, and they can be unsettling. You may find that this inner stranger carries emotions you have denied for years, anger that was never expressed, grief that was never mourned, desires that were never pursued. These feelings have been stored away, like old letters in a locked drawer, waiting for the day you would have no choice but to read them. Meeting them now, without the shield of distraction, can feel overwhelming. There is a temptation to turn away, to retreat back into the comfort of noise and company. But the stranger remains, waiting patiently for acknowledgement. Part of the discomfort comes from realizing how much time has been spent avoiding this meeting. You may see patterns of compromise where you traded authenticity for acceptance, or choices that led you further from your own nature in order to keep peace with others. Alone, these decisions take on a different weight. Without the approval of others to justify them, you begin to ask yourself whether they were worth the cost. There is also the realization that you have lived alongside this stranger for your entire life. They have influenced your feelings, guided your instincts, and whispered in your quietest moments, even when you pretended not to hear. You may remember times when their voice urged you toward a certain path, only for you to silence it in favor of what seemed safer or more reasonable. Now, in solitude, their voice grows clearer, and you cannot help but wonder what your life might have been if you had listened more closely. Meeting this neglected self is not easy. There is an intimacy to it that feels almost invasive, as though you are peering into the life of someone else. But as the moments stretch on, you begin to see that this stranger is not an intruder. They are the core of who you are. The discomfort comes not from their presence, but from the years spent apart. Solitude makes this meeting inevitable. Without others to reflect back the image you have constructed, you are left with the pure reflection of yourself. It may be awkward at first, even painful, but there is a quiet recognition in that encounter. Somewhere deep inside, you know you have not truly been afraid of being alone. You have been afraid of finally meeting the person you were always meant to be. Many people spend their days chasing connection, believing that it is the cure for the unease they feel inside. They move from one conversation to another, one relationship to the next, one social event after another, hoping the presence of others will bring a sense of completeness. But often, this pursuit is less about genuine connection and more about avoiding the stillness that comes when they are left alone. The company of others becomes a shield against the quiet moments in which self-reflection might surface. In a world that praises constant engagement, solitude is often seen as a void to be filled rather than a space to be honored. People seek out noise, whether through social gatherings, endless scrolling, or the background hum of television, because noise drowns out the deeper voice within. That voice does not speak in the language of small talk or casual distraction. It speaks in truths, in questions, in reminders of the parts of ourselves we have neglected. When surrounded by others, it is easier to focus on their stories, their needs, their problems, and ignore the unresolved truths of our own. This is why some feel restless when they are not interacting. They are not addicted to people so much as they are dependent on the relief that distraction provides. The presence of others can be a comfortable mask, hiding not just vulnerabilities from the outside world, but also hiding them from oneself. The fear is that, without that buffer, the silence will pull hidden thoughts to the surface. Thoughts that may challenge the life they have built, or the choices they have made. Even relationships can become an escape if they are built on the need to avoid oneself. A person might seek constant validation, not because they truly crave connection, but because they need someone else to confirm their worth in order to avoid questioning it on their own. Friendships, romantic relationships, even casual acquaintances can be unconsciously used as shields, preventing one from ever standing fully alone with the self. The truth is that meaningful connection is impossible without first facing oneself. Otherwise, relationships are built on an incomplete foundation with parts of the self hidden away. This often leads to patterns of dependence, where the presence of others is necessary to feel safe or whole. And yet, the safety is fragile. Take away the crowd, and the same discomfort returns. It is not that people are wrong to seek companionship. It is that companionship cannot replace the work of self-confrontation. Without it, even the closest bonds cannot dissolve the quiet truth that waits in moments of solitude. No matter how many conversations are held, how many friends are gathered, or how many hours are spent surrounded by others, the inner voice remains, waiting for the moment when all the noise dies down so it can be heard again. The truths we carry within us have a patience that is almost unnerving. They do not vanish simply because we choose not to see them. They wait, quietly but persistently, in the background of our lives, surfacing in moments we least expect. We can distract ourselves for years, even decades, with work, relationships, entertainment, and endless to-do lists, but the truths we avoid remain untouched, like letters left unopened in a drawer. They are in no hurry, because they know that sooner or later, life will lead us back to them. In those rare moments when the world becomes still, when the phone is silent, the tasks are complete, and no one is asking for our attention, these truths step forward. Sometimes they arrive as faint whispers, a thought that drifts through the mind and lingers longer than expected. Other times, they strike with sudden clarity, reminding us of something we knew deep down but refused to acknowledge. The quiet becomes a stage, and these truths, long ignored, take their place in the spotlight. The more we have avoided them, the more intense their presence feels. This is why stillness can be uncomfortable for many. It is not the absence of activity that disturbs them, but the sudden presence of what they have buried. Memories of choices made out of fear rather than desire, realizations about relationships that no longer serve us, awareness of dreams we abandoned without even trying. All of these resurface in the stillness. And while the temptation to turn away is strong, avoiding them only ensures they will return, perhaps with even greater weight next time. There is no hiding place deep enough to escape them completely. They live within us, woven into our thoughts, shaping our decisions, influencing our emotions in ways we may not even notice. We can change jobs, cities, partners, or entire lifestyles. But until these truths are faced, they travel with us, silent passengers on every journey we take. The persistence of these inner realities is not meant to punish us, it is meant to guide us. They exist because they hold pieces of ourselves we have lost or ignored. They are reminders of our own integrity, pulling us back toward alignment with who we really are. But to receive their guidance, we must stop running. We must be willing to sit in the quiet and let them speak, even when their message disrupts the comfort of our current life. This is why the truth can feel so heavy when it finally demands to be heard. It has been gathering strength over time, waiting for the moment when we are ready, or forced, to face it. And no matter how much we delay, that moment always comes. Whether it arrives gently in a pause between breaths or crashes into us during a life-changing event, the truth will not be silenced forever, because it was never truly gone to begin with. The greatest act of bravery is not found in grand gestures or public victories, but in the quiet decision to face oneself without running away. It is far easier to confront the criticism of others than to stand before the mirror of your own soul. In the eyes of others, you can defend, explain, or even disguise who you are, but in the presence of your own truth, there is nowhere to hide. The courage required here is not about enduring loneliness, it is about enduring honesty. When you turn inward, you enter a territory that is both familiar and unknown. Familiar, because you have lived with yourself every day of your life. Unknown, because much of who you are has been kept in the shadows. There are rooms within your mind you have never opened. Doors you have walked past countless times without turning the handle. In those rooms live the parts of you that were silenced. Memories you chose to forget, emotions you deemed unacceptable. Dreams you once carried but left behind. Meeting them again demands not just willingness, but a certain strength that does not come from pride or defiance, but from humility. True courage means sitting with the parts of yourself that make you uncomfortable, the parts that reveal your contradictions and flaws. It means acknowledging the times you have betrayed your own values, the times you acted out of fear instead of conviction, the moments when you settled for less than you knew you deserved. This is not the kind of battle that can be won quickly. It is a slow, deliberate process of peeling back layers, of seeing yourself without judgment, even when what you see does not match the image you have built for the world. There will be resistance. Your mind will offer 1,000 reasons to get up, to call someone, to fill the air with music or conversation, anything to avoid the silence that forces you to listen to the truth. And yet, the more you resist, the more the tension grows. Eventually, you must choose between living in constant avoidance or gathering the courage to face what is already within you. Once you choose to stay, something begins to shift. At first, the truths you meet may feel heavy, even unbearable. But over time, you start to see them not as enemies, but as guides. They show you where you have been hiding, where you have been dishonest with yourself, where you have been living small out of fear. In this way, The act of facing yourself becomes not just an act of courage, but an act of liberation. The courage to meet yourself is the foundation upon which all other forms of strength are built. Without it, every external victory feels hollow, every success incomplete. With it, even the smallest step forward carries the weight of truth, and there is no longer a need to fear the quiet moments when you are alone with your own reflection. The judgment of others can be harsh, unpredictable, and at times deeply painful, but it is never as constant or as penetrating as the judgment we place upon ourselves. We live with our own inner voice every moment of our lives, and it does not rest when the crowd goes home. It speaks in the silence of the night, in the pauses between conversations, in the moments when no one else is watching. This voice knows everything, every choice, every compromise, every truth we tried to bury. It is both the witness and the jury, and its verdict cannot be avoided. When we fear solitude, it is not because we believe the outside world will condemn us in those quiet hours. It is because we know that, in the stillness, the inner voice will be louder than ever. The gaze we cannot escape is not that of a stranger or a critic. It is our own. No mask, no performance, no clever words can shield us from ourselves. We can charm others into believing we are better, happier, or more fulfilled than we really are, but we cannot maintain that illusion when we are alone with our own mind. The weight of self-judgment lies in its intimacy. Others can only judge the parts of us we choose to show, but we see every hidden detail. We know the truth behind our motives, the emotions behind our actions, the fears that shaped our decisions. This knowledge makes self-judgment both more accurate and more unforgiving. It is not blind speculation. It is direct awareness. And because it is our own voice, it cannot be silenced by argument or persuasion, the way another person's opinion might. For many, the fear of facing this judgment is what drives the constant search for noise and distraction. If we can keep ourselves busy enough, surrounded by enough people, we can delay the moment when the inner voice speaks. But delaying is not the same as avoiding. The voice always returns, and with it comes the realization that we are not running from others, we are running from ourselves. Yet, there is a strange truth hidden within this fear. The same inner voice that judges us can also guide us. Its criticism, though sharp, is often a reflection of the standards we hold for ourselves, standards born from our deepest values. When we choose to face it, to listen instead of run, it becomes less of a punisher and more of a teacher. It points out the places where we have been dishonest, the choices that have led us away from who we truly are, and the steps we might take to return to alignment. The real challenge is not to silence this voice, but to hear it without collapsing under its weight. To let its judgment reveal the truth, without letting it destroy the self it is trying to protect. In this way, the moments of solitude that once felt unbearable can become the very moments that lead us back to our own integrity. In the end, it was never solitude that haunted you. It was the truth of meeting